Welcome everyone to Idea Generation. So Oasis is all about making you or enabling you to make your software ideas a reality, and idea generation is an integral part of that. An integral part of any project development process. I'll hand it over to Chris now to introduce Steve Flanagan, who's going to be our speaker for today.
So once again, thank you all so much for coming. Today we have an amazing speaker who's going to be talking to us about how we can come up with ideas for our own personal projects and some things to think about and ways we can brainstorm. So Steve is a fourth-year student in computer science major in the Corey College of Computer Sciences. He founded the Cryptocurrency Club. He's also the founder of his own startup, which has gone through the idea called Bountium, which works with the blockchain. And he is also a big fan of donuts. So he knows a lot about kind of coming up with his own project from scratch, and he's going to be sharing with us some ways we can do that for our own projects.
Thanks, Chris. Like Chris said, guys, I'm a really big, advocate for project-based learning. It's how, I developed a lot of my skills. And I really think Oasis is going to be a great venue for all of you to, build your own skills and be able to take things from an idea all the way through execution to making something real from nothing. That's why I'm, so excited about computer science and software. I think it's really amazing that you can, with just a computer in your own brain, bring something into reality with no materials, no supply chain, nothing except, effort and thinking. And so really excited to sort of, help you all take that first step and generate some ideas that'll hopefully, be a great resource for your own learning and maybe do something beyond that too. So the way we're going to structure this today is we're going to spend 20 minutes talking about, why even work on projects, right? Why not just hit the books and go through a traditional track of learning? What is the value of, doing something of your own volition, your own idea? And then going through, what does a successful project look like? There's infinitely many things you could be working on. How do you narrow that down? Or the reverse, how do you start coming up with ideas that make sense? How do you go from nothing to something? And so we'll talk about some case studies, try to highlight what was successful and not successful about different projects. And finally, you all with some places for inspiration and maybe work through some exercises on how to come up with ideas. So we'll have some time for questions, and then we'll be working through strategies together. So first part of that, why are we even bothering with this? Why are projects a valuable way to learn? And so the first obvious part of that is that, the best way to learn new skills is to pursue projects. Learning happens when you're actively engaging with material, right? And when you're actually choosing to apply your skills. You're going to retain skills for a lifetime. And that's how you, discover skills that you didn't necessarily plan on, building yourself around. I know that I first started deciding to code when it was probably in sophomore year of high school, and I had read about how people were storing passwords in this thing called hashes, and I thought I had invented the concept of you could brute force your way to guessing what a hash was if you knew how to run the hash algorithm. And so I thought I invented that. I was obviously clearly wrong, but it was a really good learning experience for me because I had to go figure out how do I use code to automate the process of generating a bunch of guessing passwords, comparing two hashes, that kind of thing. And I did a very bad job at first, but it felt very empowering, that I could even take a whack at it and try it. I learned that it was a bad project idea, by the end of it in terms of usefulness, but in terms of learning, it was a great way to learn. I got to figure out what hashes were, how they worked, different things to consider when using them, that kind of thing. And so I had a lot of fun with it, and I learned a lot. And so, I think that applying your skills in real time and in the real world is the best way to learn them, and to learn them for a long time in a way that rote memorization. And so a second great thing about side projects is that help you connect with others. Very little software in this world, especially in 2020, gets built alone. You're always working with a team, and teams coalesce around action. If you're building a real project, instead of just reading out of books, other people will want to join you, help you, and enable you. So, projects help showcase what you as a person are like. You're generating output, you're doing something real. And it also allows you to meet with others and maybe find other people and help them along their learning journey as well. And so what makes a good project? How are we going to pick something to do? First of all, and this sounds kind of silly, but it's actually really important, this actually has to be fun. You're not going to stick with this if you're not enjoying it. And if you don't stick with it, you're not going to learn. So you have to figure out a project that you're actually going to enjoy building. And that can be difficult to anticipate, right? Because there might be something where you love the idea. You want this project to be real. You'd probably actually use it. But if you don't enjoy the act of building it, it's going to be a lot easier to get discouraged. So it's really something to take seriously and consider and think about, what kinds of creation have you enjoyed before? Are you somebody that loves to see visual changes in real time? And so maybe you want a really front-end intense project, or maybe you're somebody that, finds the power of prediction really exciting and compelling. And so you want something really data-driven. Or maybe you're somebody that loves to, see the physical world interact with your work. And maybe you want to do something that's like IoT related. So think about, what do you actually enjoy interacting with? What kinds of work have you enjoyed in the past? Maybe schoolwork, maybe like you loved, I don't know, like you really loved calculus because you loved how you can visualize, how different functions behave over time. And so maybe that means you're a visually oriented person and a front-end project is the kind of project you want to do. So think about what you have fun building, because building can be fun. And so, if you're picking your own project, there's no reason not that you're going to really enjoy. And so secondly, you want to shoot for a project that is simple to get a useful state, right? You want it to be modular. And what I mean by this, right, is that you could take on a project that is really going to change the world, and you're actually going to have fun building it along the way. So you're already like most of the way there. But if it's going to take you 3 years to even get to a place where you can test and use it, I can really promise that you're going to get pretty sick of the project, over time. Feedback is a huge driver for your own motivation. When other people get to interact with your work and actually play with it and tell you what they like and didn't like, that will get you super, super excited, I promise you. So if you can pick a project where, maybe not the whole thing is really simple, but you can get it to something feedback testable, maybe within, a couple weeks, a couple months, that's going to be so much better for your own motivation, just because you're going to know that light of the tunnel is there and you're going to be really, really excited to show off what you're doing to other people. So try to make something that, with 1 or 2 user flows, someone could poke around with it and test it. And then the other thing too, not only will that motivate you a lot better, but if you're down a wrong path, right? If you're building a project that actually isn't useful, which is possibly fine, but maybe if you're really aiming to do something that, you think is going to be useful, you want to know that really early on. And so if you can just build something where it can start small, start simple, and then you can show it off and get feedback, it's going to be a really successful learning endeavor for you. And so related to this, right, it's great if your project can provide you individually value. I know that if I'm working on, sometimes in fundies, for example, we'd get a fundies project and it would seem so abstract and random and it really would not excite me, right? It'd be like, whoever would want, a racket-based music player? I have no reason to actually ever need that. But instead, if I'm doing a personal project and I can actually, envision myself using what I built in like 3 weeks, that gets me super, super driven. And so, this isn't like a hard and fast rule, but if you can build something that you yourself are going to enjoy, first of all, you're motivated, but second of all as well, then you can get into all the customization that you can want. You get to kind of feel like, the ruler of the kingdom here, where you get to tailor this product to exactly how you see yourself wanting to use it. And that's really empowering, right? No longer are you going to be, on like a app or website and complaining about how it feels to interact with or complaining about features and bugs, because you're the one building it, right? And so you're going to know, oh, I actually really wish it would do X. Well, let me just go make it do X. And so, it really puts you in a position of like, an empowered user that you're going to enjoy. And so this is optional, but a lot of times, you might find it exciting to work on a project that could become a product out in the real world. And so that's something we can talk about too. It's something that I love doing. I'm currently working on Bountium, and we're helping solve banks and businesses problems with this thing called a letter of credit. And so I could talk your ear off about it, but the main point I'm trying to make here is that can be a really motivating factor too. Obviously there's the fiscal motivation. If somebody's going to pay you for it, that's really going to get you out of bed to go work on it. But it also means that you can build an organization to go, promote this product, to promote your project and to maintain it far into the future and build it into a really exciting future where have an organization's force, right, to go build this project and make it as successful and as useful as it can be. So that's not, a strict need to have for all projects, right? My first project, that hash cracker, like that was not useful for anybody. I was just redoing something that already existed, but I learned a lot from it. But on the other hand, if you want to, spend your time and effort building something that's useful for people, that can be really compelling and exciting too. And so we'll talk a little bit about how to, make sure you're doing that if that's part of your goals here. But also really want to stress that, right, the goal here is to get an exciting, playful project going for yourself so you can build your skills and have fun doing it. So we're going to walk through some case studies, talk about how some projects you guys might know, some of my own personal experience as well, talk about, which of these 4 factors to consider each one succeeded and failed on. And so the first one is Bountium. And so Bountium is my company, and we help banks and businesses use a financial instrument called a letter of credit in order to import goods. And so the financial instrument itself is a bit complex, but the point of it, right, is the bank gets involved in a transaction between 2 businesses to make sure that businesses can trust each other. One business knows it's going to get paid for delivering goods to the other. And so I find that problem really compelling, right? Because I think trust is a really important issue. And so it feels like I'm doing something important for the world. And it also is a very nuanced problem that I enjoy thinking about. There's lots of different kinds of transactions we get to learn about. I've learned a lot about different supply chains, like seafood, for example. I never knew how food actually gets onto the table. And so I got to learn a lot and engage with a lot of material that I didn't think I'd ever interact with otherwise. And so that's, something exciting about projects that are useful for people other than yourself, right? Is that you end up meeting all these other people and learning about their lives and what they need out of your product. And you end up learning quite a bit more than you set out to. But so the initial version of Bountium was completely different. I was building something that I was having a lot of fun with, but was not useful to the outside world. We were actually trying to build smart contracts that leverage the Ethereum blockchain to help one business make a purchase from another business without needing any middleman in order to trust them. And so the actual tech behind it was essentially that a blockchain has this like global network of computers, right, that can all observe commitments. And so usually those commitments are transactions. But we made a more complex commitment where essentially one business was saying exactly what they're purchasing and what their expectations were, and offering to pay anybody who could meet those expectations in an objective, definable way, right? And so that was really exciting to me because it felt like I was introducing this new way for businesses to work together. And I had some really, niche nerds like myself out on the internet that wanted to test it and use it and help me expand on it. And I spent like 6 months working on this, and I had a lot of fun. That was the first thing, right? Is that this is the kind of work I love doing. I love working with concepts like trust, with cryptography, because it's the kind of thing that, my brain just never gets tired of. I'm really curious about it. And it was really simple and modular, right? The initial thing that I built took maybe like a weekend hackathon to build. We were using smart contracts and writing them in this language called Solidity. And then we spun up a really simple React application that talked to the Ethereum blockchain using a library called Web3. And so I was kind of just composing together some tools that made it a bit easier for me. And so it did not take long to make it something that people could play with, right? By the end of the weekend, people could actually use our tool, issue those smart contracts, and try it out and see if it was useful. If we had instead said, all right, we're going to build, something that makes it so seafood companies can do this exact specification with 10,000 fields and know exactly who their counterparty is across the world anonymously, like we could have added all those features. And that's something we ended up doing over time anyways. But that first weekend was we built a simple contract where people can say, I'm buying XYZ from you, and those things are objective, and then they can offer a payment, right? And we built a simple React application where you got those 3 inputs. Who are you buying from? What are you buying? How much are you paying? And that's it, right? And so it's simple to get to a point where people could play with it and use it. And that was really important to, fostering that excitement and getting us going on it. And so it provided value. We were providing a trustworthy way for businesses to work together. But at the end of the day, we spent like 6 months, and then we found out that real businesses didn't want to use this tool for a lot of reasons. The biggest one being that like they can't sue any middleman if there is no middleman. And businesses need to be able to sue middlemen when something goes wrong in order to feel comfortable. It was just this kind of marketing problem that we weren't going to get over. And so we pivoted. We started focusing on this letter of credit thing where there is a middleman, and we were able to create a lot more value. And we can talk later about, how you identify what a valuable problem to work on is. It's something I've thought a lot about. But the important thing to realize is that in terms of learning, both projects were really, really valuable for my learning. The first one was, I was using cryptography. I was, trying to think about the problem of trust. The second one is really just, it's a Django application with a React front end. And there's a bit of complexity in like, how much detail do we have to communicate? But at the end of the day, it's like, it's a CRUD application, if you guys are familiar with the term, right? We're creating assets, we're reading from them, we're updating them, we're deleting them. And so technically it was less complex, but it still was fun because the subject matter was exciting to me. It was simple to get to a useful point. And this time we were providing value to myself and also all these other users that really, really get me, excited to work on the problem. And so one that really failed a lot of these little filters here was a different project I worked on for the Cryptocurrency Club. And so developing smart contracts and working with a blockchain, it sounds like an intimidating prospect. And it actually doesn't have to be very intimidating. And initially, a lot of this was in like 2017 when there weren't many developer tools out there to help people work with blockchains. And so I wanted to build some tools that would make it easier to get a development environment spun up to work with a blockchain. And so essentially what I was doing, right, is that a lot of the ways that you got up and running with a blockchain was using all these command line tools. And the command line seems to intimidate a lot of people that would otherwise be, good learners and could get excited about blockchain. And so I wrote some scripts that automated a lot of the command line work. And those were initially just bash scripts. But once I had that up and running, people said, oh, it'd be really cool if you had like a visual interface and that it was running those bash scripts under the hood so that I could type my code kind of like Eclipse, right? If you guys are familiar for Java development, we were going to do an Eclipse for blockchain development. And that got me excited because, that seemed like it would open up a lot of people to blockchain development, getting a lot more people excited about it, which is something I wanted to do. I always wanted to evangelize it out. But it turned out to be a huge undertaking. Getting a good visual development environment up and running, like there is so much stuff you have to communicate to a developer, and to do that like elegantly is very challenging. And so first of all, it's not the type of coding I like doing. I don't like spending a lot of time tweaking visuals personally. So it wasn't very fun. Secondly, it took forever to get to a place where it was actually going to be useful for anybody. It took me about 6 months. I had to learn this like janky Python library if I was going to do it for local instances. But it definitely provided value and it definitely solved a problem. And so, that was where the tension came from, was that, how much of my own like displeasure am I willing to go through to go provide this value for other people? And so in terms of like, if this would have been a good side project for my own learning, this would not have been. This was something that I ended up doing because, I wanted to help at the Cryptocurrency Club and help teach kids to develop with blockchains. But I would probably have instead found somebody else to help me with it who enjoyed the visual side a lot more. That would have made it quite a bit simpler to undertake. And so Facebook is a good example. And a lot of you guys have probably seen that movie about the founding of Facebook. You probably already know the story, but I guess I'll give you guys the synopsis anyways. But so this is a good example of something that made both a really good side project and also, of course, ended up being a really good business. And so it started out simple. Essentially, Mark Zuckerberg's problem was that he wanted to know more about the social lives of his peers at Harvard, right? And specifically, in the movie and popular tale about it is that he wanted to know which girls in his dorm were single, right? And he wanted some way that people could store that information and then view it later about others. And so it provided value to him, kind of questionable value, but provided value to him. And it solved a problem for his friends. But so first of all, it was fun, right? And it seemed like it was kind of fun because it was social for him. He was getting to, provide this new medium for his friends to interact with each other. And it was simple too, right? If you think about it, if Facebook exists, right? But you personally decided, I'm going to build a thing that lets my friends make profiles for themselves online, right? And you could probably do that like in pretty quickly. It's going to be a backend where somebody can maybe store a picture associated with themselves, maybe write a few lines of a bio, and then publish it to maybe like a custom URL or something. And so there's not that many user flows you're going to have to build, and a lot of it can be done with existing technologies. And so that was what was really compelling about Facebook, in my opinion, was that he could get it to a useful state really quickly and then start sending it around to other people and see what they want to do with it, right? I'm sure that Mark Zuckerberg didn't think that people would do political organizing on Facebook when he started in 2004. But the fact that he could get it to a place where it was usable by other people and then send it to them and see what they're going to do with it, right? It made this, he got this feedback loop going with his users. And that's always going to be a huge factor in getting yourself motivated and excited about your project. So that's something really to emphasize, is that the faster you can get to usable, the better you're going to do with this project and the more fun you're probably going to have. And so right now we're going to spin through a couple sources of inspiration. I think a lot of people kind of get intimidated by, the blank page, right? All of a sudden you have all these ideas in normal life, but then when you actually try to sit down and then generate ideas, it feels really, really hard to go from nothing to something. And so it can be really useful to, look at other sources of inspiration and try to get your own brain jogging so that you're not going from literally nothing to try to generate ideas. And so the first one and the best one is going to be your interests. I'm super interested in cryptography. I love cryptography. And I'm also super interested in like the concept of trust and why we trust each other and how we do it and how we define it, right? And so that was what intersected for me to get excited about Bountium, right? I was going to get to use cryptography to make trust easier. And so, those are two kind of like weird interests, but I could have equally found, like I'm a huge runner, for example. I love to run. And so I'm sure that there's projects I could build and enjoy building related to running. This could be about stuff you like, stuff you do every day, stuff that you do with your friends. So just try to think about, what you love to do, what you do in your free time. And then try to see, if there's ways that software could enable that activity or maybe enable other people to get into the activity. And so the second one is checking out what other people are building. And so there's sites like Product Hunt and Kickstarter. There's also, media outlets like Wired, there's lots of them. Anything that talks about tech and talks about what new people are building. There's forums like Hacker News. There's all sorts of subreddits. There's a lot of places where you can see what people are building and not only try to think about it as a source of inspiration in the sense that like, oh, I could do something like that, but you could also try to niche it down, right? You could try to say like, well, what if I took their product and used it in a totally different domain, but with a similar function? And so that can be a really good way for you to, just get your own brain moving. And the goal obviously isn't to copy people, but the goal is to just, try to give your brain something to grapple with first, and then you can start getting your original thoughts to flow a lot easier because you've removed that intimidation of a blank page, And so this is a couple of random samples. Like these are probably just top posts from today. Product Hunt's really fun, also a really like well-designed interface. And so you can just appreciate that about it. But definitely just go there, click around, people are always really grateful to beta testers as well. So if you can ever find software that isn't even really released yet, I do that all the time, especially there's cryptocurrency projects will sometimes even pay you to like go be a beta tester for them. And so it can be really fun to go, kind of feel like you're on the edge, go see what the newest thing is, and also actually help out other developers that need your feedback. And so these are some Kickstarter as well. So, sometimes they're physical, sometimes they're software. Either one can be an inspiration for you. The goal is to try to just get you off the blank page, right? And get your brain just moving. And so finally, you can be social with it, right? If you can just talk to your friends, your coworkers, maybe people in your interests, right? I'm a big runner. If I go talk to fellow runners and ask them, hey, like what's something you wish you could do with running that you don't get to do right now? This is a tried and true strategy for figuring out, what to even think about building. What could you possibly just make that's useful for someone else? And so obviously this strategy could be more oriented towards products, right? And so if your goal is to have fun and learn, you don't want to trap yourself in and only try to think about what's useful for other people.
Cake.
But anyways, just talking to people, and then this is great too, because then you can, send it back to them once you already build it and ask them if it's what they had in mind. So this is a really good way to start getting relationships that can then be used to get feedback on your project once you have, that version 0.1 up. And so in summary, side projects are a great catalyst for personal growth and especially collaboration, right? Project building is a really social activity if you want, and it's a great way for you to, build your team skills and maybe even grow your network. And so it should be fun. It should be enough where you can get it out the door and get some feedback on it. And it should be beneficial for you so that you can get excited about it. And maybe it could be market viable. Maybe it's something you could build a career around. And so there's lots of places to look to for inspiration, and you should try not to, get too bogged down by staring at a blank page, but instead try to look at the world around you and see what can get your brain moving. And so if there's any questions, we'd love to answer them. There's also other mentors in the room that I'm sure could have good answers too, but any questions? I'm also happy, any questions about, you know, my personal experience, I'm happy to expand on. I'm an open book. So
Thank you, Stephen, for the presentation. So I have a question. It's a bit like philosophical. How did you sort of do the trade-off between like sort of disclosing what you're working on and like keeping things for yourself? I mean, how, depending on how you perceive the idea.
yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So in my personal belief on it is that with software, I think that there's not usually secrets worth keeping with software. I think that if I was working on like something related to biochemistry, for example, and I had innovated some really novel compound that like is a total difference maker in what I'm trying to build, right? That I would keep secret because, you know, that probably took years of research and is really hard to reproduce. But with software, you know, I think that the execution is really the differentiator, right? If someone else could take the description of my project from me and build it and take it to market faster than I could, like, honestly, I probably wasn't even going to win the market to begin with, right? Because at some point I would have had to publicly show off what I've built, right? And so if I keep it secret, I might get myself a couple months advantage, but at the same time, I'm keeping it secret. So that means I'm not making any progress in actually growing, you know, interest in the product, right? And so it's really not that much of a head start that I'm giving myself other than on the building side, right? And especially in a world where you can pay for software development, right? And you can get involved in your project. And so even if I give myself a couple months advantage, if somebody else can just go raise a bunch of funding from VC, go pay for software development, right? Like they're probably going to be able to outcompete me anyways. And so if I instead of keeping it secret, I'm really open about it. And I just instead know, it's kind of like a Cortez burning his ships, right? Like I purposely share it as widely as I can because I want to focus on the execution and make sure that I'm being as great building software and spreading the word as I can be, you know?
We have a couple questions in the chat.
Oh, sweet. I can't see the chat right now.
Okay, so we have a question. When do you know you have enough skills to tackle a side project? And so someone who's new to programming, when do you know you have enough skills to start working on something like this?
Yeah, so personally, I feel like I'm very capable of learning stuff on the fly, and I learn stuff by actually doing it and using it, right, in practice. And so I think that if anybody joined this call, right, they're probably the type of person that can, you know, think critically and adapt to new tools much better than they might even think that they themselves can. And so what I would recommend, right, is that I would try to if you have a project idea and you're worried that you don't know enough to go out and build it, I would maybe try to first identify what tools you could even use to get there, right? And that's kind of the hardest part sometimes. And so maybe talk to other people and be like, hey, here's my project idea. What would you use to build it? And so if you know what tools are out there to use, that can make the whole thing a lot less intimidating, right? If you kind of just make a plan where you're like, if I was gonna do this, what would I use? How would I use it? And then you can look at that. And then at that point, you can be a lot more honest with yourself, right? Like if, for example, like, you know, with the IDE Wriggle that I was building, right? The tools that I was going to have to use to make a good, you know, visual experience on the local application, if I had thought kind of ahead of time and said, all right, well, here's a couple Python libraries that look viable. Here's what I would have to do with them and how much time I'd have to spend on each step, you know, that's maybe one where I could have backed off and said, well, you know, maybe this is kind of better suited to somebody more experienced here. But I didn't even do that step. I didn't even look at the tools I had available and then spend time thinking about what I would do with them. But I would also, I mean, I'd really caution you and tell you that you're probably smarter than you think you are, and you're probably more capable of learning new tools and just figuring it out by, you know, trying something and then tweaking it as you go. Because it's okay to, you know, try it and then it comes out wrong. But at least now, you know, you're at a point where you know, well, if I fix X, Y, and Z, it'll be right. Whereas if you stay at this point now where you're kind of paralyzed and trying to, you know, look for reasons to do it or not do it, then you're not even going to get to a point where you can start tweaking and getting it to correct, you know?
So we had a question right here. So is the workshop series enough to tackle a project? And what's the benefit of the accelerator? So the workshop series is designed to get you started with, if you have a little bit, maybe even none, but just a little bit of programming knowledge, it's designed to help you get using those skills that are more kind of abstract towards making actual concrete apps and web apps and projects that people can actually use. You take maybe Fundies perhaps, you're kind of making stuff in there, but people can't really use those programs too much. So we really want to impart the skills for making projects that both you can use and benefit you to solve a problem, but also you can be spread out for other people to benefit from as well. Just like we saw in product Kickstarter, these are projects people made. They could, I'm sure a lot of them even started as side projects that are now able to benefit and help the lives of other people. So that's what the workshop series is designed to do. The accelerator is a place where that will help you foster the project creation. So you'll get paired with a mentor who will guide you through that process and with a small team. And together you'll be able to support each other along the way towards gaining those skills and keeping that project going, which I think many of our experiences is much more fun and also effective than building a project on your own. So yeah, there's some really good questions here. We'll answer a couple more. There is still more to the workshop that we want to get through. Steve, do you think maybe really quickly you can address what a user flow is, how to balance project time between classes?
Yeah. So a user flow is it's just something that takes a user from having like a need to having their need met. And so that can be really small, right? I read an article. I would like to give my thoughts on the article, right? And so the user flow there is I go into a comment box, I type my comment, and then I hit post, and then I can see my comment, perhaps like chronologically ordered among other comments. And how to balance project time between classes? That's a good question. I mean, sometimes you can make your project the class project in a class. So definitely try to do that if you can, and try to, oftentimes for class projects, people are so wrapped up in grades that they just pick something that is like really not that inspiring because they figure they can, it'll be simple enough to get a good grade on. But if you can instead make it something that you are really inspired by and that you might want to use at the end of the class, I think you'll probably actually write better code because you're more into the project anyways and get a better grade. But also you're going to actually learn a lot more and have a lot more self-growth. And so that's kind of one way to get two birds done with one stone. But if you can't do that, so first of all, doing your project through like a club of some kind, like Oasis, is one way to make sure that you set aside time for it for yourself. Because I think a lot of the stress of balancing class and projects is kind of from the unsureness, right? Where you want to make time for the project, but you could be doing homework. And so if you instead schedule it out and you say, well, I'm going to be at Oasis, 12:30 to 3:30 every Saturday or whatever it is, that'll kind of remove a lot of the guilt and stress from your mind and you'll enjoy it. At the same time, obviously there's weeks where you can have a lot of homework. And so it can't happen every week. But, if you happen to get a day off or you happen to get Thanksgiving break or that kind of thing, I definitely love to use my days off, especially on a snow day or something, and make it a project day instead.
Awesome. These are really good questions. I'll answer the last couple in the chat, but there's still a little bit more. So yeah, thanks guys for the questions. All right, let's keep going.
Cool. So we're going to run through a couple strategies, run through them together as exercises. Chris, how do you want the participation to look? Will people just be like shouting out? Will they be on their own? Or what will that look like?
For this part, this is going to be a little bit more, solo work. Once you go into the breakout rooms, that's going to be more like kind of sharing what we're coming up with. But this is sort of like to get get the gears flowing towards coming up with actual ideas at this point. So for the next part, the short exercise here, this is going to be solo work. The next exercise also kind of solo, and then once we get in the breakout rooms, that's going to be more of the chance to share what you guys come up with. So it'll be in smaller groups.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, we'll go over what the strategies are, explain the exercises. And then in the smaller groups, we'll be excited to hear what you come up with. So goal here, right? We want to generate novel ideas. That always makes projects really fun. You know, the hash cracker project I mentioned at the beginning, right? Like that was not novel. I thought it was, and that's why I was really excited. And it compelled me to learn to code in the first place. So, you know, kind of an invaluable part of my life, but at the same time, it would have been a lot cooler if I actually was inventing something. And so, you know, we want to get something both novel and creative. And so creativity is a skill that can be honed. I think a lot of, you know, popular media tries to paint this like, you know, the born creative genius, right? But I really don't think that's how it works. I think that instead, you know, when you practice creativity and you reward yourself for creativity, I think is something you can definitely hone and encourage. And so the goal, right, is that if we trying to get creativity, we're trying to get the intersection of novelty and relevance, right? If you make something novel, but it's like totally weird, like, oh, I built a guitar out of rocks, like, great. Like, you know, that could be art, I guess, but it's like, you know, probably not like very good for like, you know, actually using the guitar. And so we want to make it relevant in the sense that it accomplishes something for somebody. And so quick little exercise is that we could take 3 minutes. Wait, so Chris, are we taking 3 minutes now, or we're just telling them they can do this later?
Oh, let's take 3 minutes right now. I'll set, actually, I think 2 minutes, just so we can keep moving. I'm going to set a quick timer, but this is just sort of our first brainstorming exercise here.
Okay.
I'm going to set a quick 2-minute timer here.
Yeah, so take 2 minutes to write down as many ideas for a medieval kid story as you can. And so, you know, it doesn't have to be crazy or anything, but just take 2 minutes and then try to get.
Question, like a toy for some kid who's in medieval times, or a toy themed about medieval times?
Like a toy someone would use in the medieval era, like a kid during that era.
Okay, that one. Okay, thanks.
Using whatever resources they had available.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay.
All right, the timer is starting right now. All right, it's 2 minutes up right now. Also, sorry for the quality. I've been getting some complaints about that. I'll try to fix it.
Cool. Are we sharing ideas? We have time.
Yeah, if anyone has any ones they want to share, absolutely.
Well, I was thinking maybe like a medieval Beyblade, like with a spinning top, because, you know, I mean, like making teeth for like a gear is not that much of a hard sell. And so they could, you know, you could just sell like little spinning things that in, you know, like a mercantile you know, marketplace, and the kids would buy it and just like spin it to see whose top fell down first or something. I don't know.
They had dreidels back then, right?
Yeah, so I was thinking, like, what if you had like souped up, like if you took the concept of Beyblade and brought it into medieval times, because you know it's not you don't have that much engineering. I mean, and you could have like, you know, you could sell them for cheaper by, you know, having them half made, and so the peasant kids, I guess, could like edit them a little bit, you know, do it yourself, and they feel like they have it customized, bring value to them. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like the modularity.
I don't know. Sure.
That's a great idea. Anyone else?
I ended up thinking of a game instead of a toy. I think it's cool. So I don't know how to verbalize it, but it's like there are two teams, and you have like a rope that you tie around 3 trees, and the other team would tie a rope around 3 trees, and inside the three trees would be your base, and you have to grab a piece of stone and like throw it and get it into the other team's base. It's like, so it's a matter of of picking your location and making it like a difficult location to throw a stone into it.
It's kind of like all-terrain basketball, like except you get to like place your hoop.
Exactly. I don't know. You get to place your hoops, and like you have, so you can use the terrain, or you can use like the trees in some strategic way. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
No, cool. All right.
Yeah, I get some good ones in the chat too. I'm liking this. Would an action figures card look like the king? Laser tag, except the lasers are sunlight reflecting off a medieval shield. I actually really like that.
Whoa. I wish I could see the chat. I'm like missing out.
Yeah, it's popping off.
Yeah. Okay, well, so why did that exercise, you know, if it helped you, why was it useful, and why did it help you generate ideas, right? And so, in my opinion, I think the reason was we defined what we wanted to accomplish, right? We said a toy, and a toy means something fun for a child, right? So we figured out what the relevant is. And then we picked a niche within that goal of accomplishing something, the medieval, you know, character. And obviously, like, you know, that is the past. We cannot actually go and give our, you know, concepts over to those people. But that kind of strategy can get abstracted out, right? If you can define something you want to accomplish. I want to help people listen to music. I want to help people find good fishing spots. I want to help people connect with other people, like, you know, and then you can pick a niche within that goal, right? I want to help, you know, professionals connect with other people. Oh, that's LinkedIn, you know? So it's a good way to think about, you know, a project idea. And especially if your goal isn't to make a product, right? Because, you know, if you're trying to make a product, you want to make sure that there's enough people out there that will pay for it, and you have to go worry about building a business. And so that's one category of projects, but there's all these other projects too that you can just have fun building, right? Instead of maybe like, you know, you want to help someone find fishing spots, or maybe I want to help, you know, maybe I want to like get like ultimate Frisbee spots in Canada specifically that have a good like view at sunset or something. If you make it really niche, it can kind of be more fun almost. So don't be afraid to chase something that's really, really like, you know, weirdly unique. Don't let that drive you off too early. And so, you know, as you practice, right, and as you do more of this kind of thinking, I'm sure you'll get better at it. And just don't let something that doesn't feel relevant enough drive you off too badly, because the goal is to learn and the goal is to enjoy it. And if it's so niche that it's really enjoyable to you, that can be a good thing. So, Chris, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so I think another thing you might, so another like point of doing that activity and like something to think about is we're coming up with project ideas. You know, we want them to be fun, we want them to have all those traits we were talking about, but you know, we also want them to be creative. You know, it's also, we want to make something, I think in many cases, that maybe no one has done before. And so when we're brainstorming, we can come up with maybe creative ideas, but it's important they stay relevant. And in this case means accomplishing exactly what we want. So the medieval toy example, you know, I think a lot of times, at least when I was doing it, kind of starts out with like more basic things and then gets a little bit more creative, but it also maybe deviates a little bit more from actually accomplishing that minimum task, which is being a toy that someone can entertain themselves with during medieval times. So when you're coming up with project ideas, and we'll be doing this in a moment here, but when you're coming up with product ideas, it's important to keep that minimum outcome in mind and then sort of expand out from there. And you'll be surprised at how much having that kind of constraint can help you, because knowing exactly what confines you have to stay within will let you know exactly how far out you can go. So if I want to make an app that helps people cook together, that's my minimum requirement. Anything else is completely fair game. So you can just make kind of a social network that people can find each other, like other partners on, or you can get a little bit more, maybe match people based on other traits, like what kind of food preferences they have to help them work better together. So this is super important to keep in mind. What is your project going to accomplish? And once you have that figured out, the world is your oyster to come up with new ideas.
Cool. So 3 big things to keep in mind, kind of wrapping up this thinking, right? You want to have something to accomplish. What is the purpose? And you want to make sure that, you don't really lose this as you keep building. Something I've noticed with myself before is that sometimes I'll have a great idea for a project and I'll start to build it, but the tools required to build it are a bit out of my comfort zone. And so I'll compromise on the purpose. I'll say, well, I'm not really going to accomplish exactly what the purpose was, but I get to, I don't have to learn any new languages. I don't have to learn any new libraries, and all of a sudden I'm disappointed with the result. And that makes sense because I compromised on the purpose. So you want to figure out what you're accomplishing and really try not to deviate from it. Really try to force yourself to use the right tools for it, even if it means learning something, the hard. But that's really, what the whole reason you're here in the first place, right? So try not to let that scare you off too much if you have to get out of your comfort zone. Restrictions, right? What problems along the way are your users having to deal with? This is relevant to your niche, right? Medieval kids do not have electricity or batteries, right? So you've got to think within those confines and make sure you don't, accidentally forget them as you're building. And that can often lead you to get more creative ideas and maybe something that, is a totally new thing that never existed before. And then finally, motivation, right? Sometimes there's an underlying problem that is actually the real problem, and you're only addressing a second order effect of that problem. And so along the way of solving the problem you happen to focus on, you might realize there's actually a really good solution to the more fundamental problem. So try to keep an open mind and don't be afraid to, jump ship and work on a bigger problem if you bump into it along the way. And so if you fall into a rut, use your tools. That includes all the resources like Hacker News and Product Hunt we mentioned. That includes your friends and family, bounce ideas off of them. People love creativity. People love talking to people that are creative. So really don't be shy about it. Just, throw your ideas at anybody that'll listen really. And I really don't think that you'll regret it. And then look at what other people are working on, brainstorm, take action, and then practice your creativity, practice thinking in a problem solving manner and understanding both constraints as well as trying to accomplish. And so another exercise we can go for, and this is probably one we'll do in small groups, but if you have 3 interests or hobbies, I'm sure everyone here does. And if you have 3 or apps or products that you enjoy using unrelated, try to think about, what are ways that could intersect? Could you do like an X for your interest, and adapt to get more specific? Maybe something about the current product that you're loving, could be even better if it catered to something really specific about your interests or hobbies. Or who you are as a person or constraints that you deal with in your life. And so try to think about how to intersect those two. And this is how a lot of good products and good companies have been founded. So, try to look at maybe other projects out there on Product Hunt, Kickstarter, Google around for them, and see what you can come up with.